Corporate media has had an interest in creating this idea that journalism is something that you can't do, that only they can do. And therefore, they have special rights that you don't have. They get to decide whose identity gets disclosed, who gets attacked, what secrets get disclosed. You have no right to do that, though, because you're not a journalist. This is a nonsensical and very self-serving distinction. So when I use the phrase employees of media corporations who bear the HR title journalist, what I'm trying to convey is this is a bullshit title. Someone asked about this label journalist, and if I could elaborate more on what really is a journalist. You know, I think that the problem has become that in the 1960s, the 1950s, the whole concept of journalism became corporatized. The means of how information was disseminated on television was so expensive that only major corporations could afford it. So Westinghouse bought CBS, then ultimately Disney bought ABC, Comcast now owns NBC, and it became, journalism did, this kind of unit of any corporation. So, you know, Disney has a film industry, a film unit, they have a merchandise unit, they have a journalism unit, and gets treated as all the same. And this idea emerged that's very ahistorical and false, that journalist is a specific kind of credentialed priesthood. Like over here you have cardiologists, and obviously to be a cardiologist you need specialized training and license from the state to call yourself that and perform heart surgery, which is how it should be. Over here you have architects and engineers who know how to build buildings, and then over here you have journalists, this kind of specialized priesthood, and they have certain privileges and rights that nobody else has. This is where I think the original error is. The idea of there's really no such thing as a journalist. What there is are citizens who do journalism. It's not really an identity, it's an activity. And all citizens can do journalism. You can do journalism all the time. You can do activism. You can practice law and practice medicine, work in a factory, and then do journalism. It was never intended to be this kind of specialized class of people who enjoyed certain rights that nobody else enjoyed. If you look at how journalism was practiced when the Constitution was enacted and a free press was guaranteed, you'll notice in the First Amendment, there's no limitation on who gets to claim freedom of the press as a constitutional right, just like there's no limitation on freedom of speech or the free exercise of religion. These are rights available to all citizens. So journalism is something that someone does. It's an act. So if Julian Assange does an act of journalism, such as shining light on what the most powerful institutions and most secretive institutions in our society are doing, or proving the lies that they're telling, I don't really care about this question, is Julian Assange a journalist or not? I don't even know what that means. I think the much bigger issue is what he's doing journalism? And if so, by definition, it's protected by the First Amendment. Corporate media has had an interest in creating this idea that journalism is something that you can't do, that only they can do. And therefore, they have special rights that you don't have. They get to decide whose identity gets disclosed, who gets attacked, what secrets get disclosed. You have no right to do that, though, because you're not a journalist. This is a nonsensical and very self-serving distinction. So the fact that one day I'm an activist for free speech or an opinionator defending free speech doesn't preclude me the next day from doing acts of journalism. I think that's the much more relevant question. And to me, journalism is a very simple activity. It is a very simple definition. It means disclosing information that the public has a right to know that's in the public's interest. So when I use the phrase employees of media corporations who bear the HR title journalist, what I'm trying to convey is this is a bullshit title. It's a corporate title, journalist. It means nothing if the person's not actually performing core journalistic functions. If, for example, they're not disclosing information in the public interest, but instead are acting as propagandists or disseminators of false information, not in order to hold accountable the most powerful institutions, but in order to serve them, then I don't think they're engaged in an act of journalism. I don't really care about the title. I don't think the title has any value. I think what matters is how we understand the act. And most important of all is that any person, even one who's never done journalism before, can suddenly step up and do journalism. The other thing I will say is that they try and create this kind of very limiting notion of what journalism is, that you have to call up some government official like in the CIA or the FBI, and they give you some little tidbit that they want you to tell the public. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. They just want it disseminated. And then you go and you've gotten this tidbit that no one else has gotten, like a little pat on the head. That's what they want you to think real journalism or reporting is. I don't think that's real journalism or reporting, because so often that doesn't help illuminate how we understand the news. It helps to obfuscate it. So for me, real journalism is something as simple as taking what is maybe already known in the public domain, facts that are already known, and analyzing and dissecting them and then reassembling them to show people what the truth is in a way that helps them understand the world in a way that people who call themselves journalists have been trying to hide. I don't think journalism requires someone to calling someone inside the government and telling that, hearing from them what they want you to say and then writing it down. Oftentimes those are acts of anti-journalism to me. People who just take publicly known facts in the public domain or documents in the public domain and help the public process it and understand it. Because I get to spend all day doing it while you have a job that you have to go to, helps me enable you to understand the world better. That to me is ultimately the core and crux of journalism.